And we'll head into the last question here before we move to Q&A. So make sure if you have questions, pop them in the chat, and Erica will be synthesizing questions and managing that discussion after this. But our last question, which is sort of a quick one that we always ask in our webinars, our last pre-form question, I should say. When we think about COVID, we always try to think, and everybody talks about the negative, what are the positives that have come out of COVID when you think about how it's impacted you or your organization? And Nevada, do you want to kick that one off?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I spent, like I said, most of my life on the Iron Range, and I was really fortunate to work for a national organization out of New York that was a women's organization, right? So I could work remotely and still live in a rural community. That was really important for me because I didn't want to leave the Iron Range. I didn't want to leave my rural community. And so when I think about the pandemic and even what we're doing right now, like I said, I worked with Teresa on the early days of 100 Rural Women and what she was thinking through and how she would be networking rural women. And I think that if we didn't have the pandemic, she wouldn't have got to this as quickly as she has. Like you wouldn't have this many women, pages of women from across the state together for breakfast clubs, right? And so there is something really incredible about the pandemic in terms of like helping bring people together and helping people to realize that like you don't have to live in the Twin Cities or an urban core to do good work. And like you can use technology to actually make those connections and continue to work. And I think that was one thing that frustrated me a lot when I would be offered jobs and they would say, well, no, you have to move to the Twin Cities or we're not going to offer this to you. And of course, I'm in the Twin Cities right now and I'm doing my MPA as well as working. But I feel really fortunate that with the Page Amendment, that isn't a requirement of me. I can live anywhere in the state that I want to. And in fact, I'm making movement right now to get back to Northeast Minnesota and to my homeland, right? Like to Northern Minnesota, where I'm more connected to my tribal community and I'm more connected to my friends and family, and I'm more connected to the land and the water and my other relatives that are there, like in the rocks and the animals and to be more connected. And I think that is one thing that the pandemic has shown is that we have the ability to do work in different ways and to make better use of our technology. And that's actually a very, very exciting thing for women, because I'll tell you on the Iron Range, I mean, there were not jobs there for me that were going to give me any opportunities around my leadership. And I wasn't going to work in the mines, right? Like that was not an interest that I had, but that's the best jobs up there are the mining jobs. And so for women, I mean, I can tell you so many crazy stories, and some of you know them, about women working to get into leadership positions, which is again what this is all about, right? But in terms of having that pay equity, I think we're going to have more ability now because we know how to use technology better, and women can stay where they want to live and still be connected to each other and still have connections of support. So to me, that's super exciting. The other thing, which is, obvious, is like the spotlight on racial justice. I think I've been working on racial equity and racial justice since I was born, since I came into this world. Whether I knew I was doing that or not, I was. And so like for those of us who have been in this fight for a long time and have been actively working on equity and justice issues, like there's something about this past year that has been really like hard, but also really good for us to get to this point to talk about these issues. And the other thing I think is just like, I don't know if it's like the pandemic, but for me, I am in a place where I'm really, and Erin talked about this a little bit, and it's how we're doing our work at the Page Amendment, but I'm really in a space where I really want to do more bipartisan work and start building bridges and finding solutions and ending the sort of polarization. I mean, I don't think we can ever end it, but working more towards solutions and working across difference. And so I think that when you're living in a pandemic and death is at your doorstep, you don't really have the ability to say, I'm not going to work on this with you, right? And there were a lot of decisions that had to be made very quickly in the past year, and for better or for worse, or however you want to see it. Like, I think it's really important that we start thinking more, I guess I would say intelligently, about how we work with people who have a different opinion than us. Those are my lessons anyway.
Thanks, Nevada. How about you, Erin?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that the pandemic did is it focused all of our attention on kind of this, like, we collectively turned our attention to kind of like 3 different topics or 3 different things at a time. And I think the first thing that that it did for our organization is it allowed us to only do information virtually, right? And that kind of, I don't want to say level the playing field, because my mom is from Hoyt Lakes, and so my family still lives up in the Iron Range, and like I know what internet service is like up there, and it's not like an even playing field. I know people have to sit outside libraries and McDonald's to like read x-rays, if their doctor's like, I know that that's real. But what it did do is it highlighted that, like, I chief authored the bill when I was in the House to expand broadband across the state. And so like now people are realizing, hey, we actually can't do anything together if we don't have internet in our homes. But it did allow people who live outside of the metro to be in same spaces as people who do live in the metro all the time, right? Like our only option was to be virtual. And so it just kind of said, all right, we're meeting on Facebook, we're meeting in this Zoom at this time. I just did a presentation for the Detroit Lakes Public Library System last week for like 2 hours. And while I would have driven to Detroit Lakes, it probably would have been a much longer timeline to schedule it and get up there and do it. And so we've been able to expand our reach and talk to more communities and talk to more people and get more information out. We just had a lobby day for Unrestricted Minnesota, for which I'm the campaign manager for. And we had 250 people show up from across the state, and 60% of people, when they filled out the feedback form, said they would prefer to keep lobby day virtual. And most of those folks lived in rural Minnesota. And so knowing that people in, rural communities were able to join, and that sometimes, driving multiple hours to the legislature for like a 15-minute meeting with their legislator, like, wasn't ideal, has really helped us understand what we want to keep and what we can adapt going forward. And I hope that means greater inclusion for people, certainly in rural communities, but also people with disabilities, people who have busy schedules, people who just like don't like to be around other people, right? It allows for people to just show up in different ways. I'll also say that this isn't anecdotal. There's research around this. I know women are leaving the workforce in droves, but one of the things that being virtual has done is it's removed some of the like gender bias things that happen when you're in person, right? I'm really short, I'm 5'2". You can't tell, I'm sitting down and I'm in front of my computer. And so some of the ways that gender bias actually shows up in the workplace, like you're too loud, you can actually turn down your volume and be whatever volume you want people to be at, right? Or you're too whatever, you can turn off your camera if somebody's bothering you. You can make your face over there. You don't have the ability to make eyes across the table. So and then I also know that people have started moving to the communities they want to live in because they can work virtually. And so my hope is actually that we decentralize where people live based on their workplace and actually have them live where they want to. So I have friends who have moved to other states, have moved to rural communities. They like sold their house and they live in what was their cabin is now just their house in a rural community. And so I think that has been really beneficial as well. Yeah, I think those are just some of them, but it's been, the pandemic has been hard. It's hard to coordinate advocacy about law through Zoom, those informal ways that we were like, hey, just real quick, lawyer, does this make sense what I wrote down? I have to like schedule a meeting and write it all out. And that's been really hard, but being able to connect with people has just gone through the roof. And I'm really grateful for that.
Wonderful. Leondra, how about you?
Thank you. I will make mine brief because Nevada and Erin pretty much touched on the key points. I will say that I'm proud. Just before the pandemic hit, we rewrote our bylaws and our personnel manual to become a 100% remote workforce. So I had the privilege of working remotely in previous positions and know that you don't need to be in an office when you do thought work. So I think other people across the country, the state, have learned that lesson and hopefully will make working more accessible to women. The two things that I think have benefit COVID has presented as an opportunity for us is an opportunity to strategize and develop work plans that support our 4 target areas, which are health equity, violence against women, reform of the criminal justice system, and women's economic security. The most pressing, I think, the biggest opportunity has been people's understanding of equity. Our organization, when we rebranded, we shifted from women's equality to equity and justice. And we still have people who don't understand the difference between equality and equity and ask us why would we want to focus on equity versus equality. And I think that conversation, that dialogue, that curiosity is helping us. And it's the negatives of COVID are actually providing our organization with an opportunity to push women in race equity and class equity issues forward and to be heard and to be taken a little bit more seriously. So it is an absolute horrendous occurrence, but there has birthed an opportunity for us to make real change, I think, out of the negatives.
Wonderful. Thanks, you guys.